Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here with you on a Monday. I do hope you had a very pleasant weekend, and today, of course, is a federal holiday. Today is Veterans Day, and that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. I invite you to join in the conversation if you're a veteran or if you have a loved one that's a veteran. Of course, it's to honor those who have served in our military, and there are a lot of issues we can talk about around this, good and bad, the hurdles and some of the barriers and the struggles that veterans deal with and the services that are out there to help them. I want to remind you also that here in Metro Nashville there's going to be a parade, as always, from 11 o'clock to about 1 downtown. And what's nice is I was just thinking, we cover that every year, of course, and Sky 5 will be up. But most of the time it's like freezing rain, or it's really cold, or it's lousy weather. And today, as it should be, I think the weather is going to hold up and should be actually fairly pleasant before we have some extreme weather coming in later tonight and into tomorrow. So the main thing this morning is joining the conversation, 737-7587. John Crenson's with us this morning to talk about a broad range of issues with Operation Stand Down. It's nice to have you. And you're going to be at the parade today, right?
Be at the parade today.
Am I right about the weather?
And oh, thank God.
I mean, I'm out there and it's frigid, and you also always want to have a larger turnout, and it's not as big when it's freezing rain as we've had in the past. Should be nice today.
It will be great today, and we're also fortunate. It's a holiday for metro government folks.
Right.
So
it's going to be
which is only the last couple of years. It'll be shut down, but hopefully that means there'll be a bigger turnout, and we'll see a lot of folks out there enjoying the good weather.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we'll be out there covering it as well, and it's good to have you on this morning. I think it's appropriate on Veterans Day to do this on MorningLine. I want to give you a chance right off the top, though, just for our viewers, to remind them what Operation Stand Down is all about. Talk about, where you're located as well and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Operation Stand Down Tennessee is at 12th Avenue and Edge Hill. Okay. Very prominent, very accessible location for our veterans to access our services. We were founded over 26 years ago, primarily to address a crisis of homelessness, chronic homelessness among veterans, and particularly those from the post-Vietnam War era. Mm-hmm. But over 26 years, we've grown. We've had some great success in being able to reduce those numbers of chronically homeless veterans in the Middle Tennessee community. And over the last half dozen years, we've been working to broaden our services to work with veterans earlier in their transition to the civilian world, or when they're at risk before they fall off into homelessness, or better yet, to help effect a smooth transition and really harness the value of a veteran for our community, that they can get really jump started into great productive life here, as most of them have had in the military as well.
And you, of course, are a veteran yourself.
Veteran myself, that's right. 30 years, Tennessee Army National Guard, very proud of that, with about 5.5 years of active service.
All right, well, we want to get into some of the needs, some of the issues that are facing them. It was interesting talking to him even as you were sharing the story with how you've been overseas and served, and you had a family,
That's right.
And there were milestones in your young children's lives that you miss when you're away. I mean, things like that happen, and a lot of things can change. The average length of service, and I know it can vary across the board. You were saying can be between 9 and 12 months, maybe a little more than that.
Yeah, about 9 to 12 months. You have some that have as short as maybe a 3 or a 6 month tour, but then you'll have some that can be gone 14 months, 16 months, up to a year and a half or so. But the average probably falls right about 9 to 12 months.
Okay, and what you experience over there can depend on what your task is, what you're assigned to. And we certainly know there are some, and we've in the news business covered a lot of this, that obviously come back with issues like post-traumatic stress syndrome or injuries and loss of.
Right.
And there are others who come back that don't appear to have suffered, knock on wood, any mental or physical injuries, but still have a issue reintegrating one way or the other. Would you say then that is pretty much par for the course for all veterans when they return, whether they have physical, mental issues, and even if they don't, if they come back and they were fortunate enough not to sustain any of that, they still have to adapt to a change of pace.
Exactly. It's a reintegration challenge. Depending on your support system, many veterans are able to do that fairly smoothly.
But what's the difference? What's it like when you're over there? You're what? You're focused, tunnel vision?
It's a great question. I recall even being very cognizant of it while I was there, and I remember sometimes just thinking it. And by the way, I was a traditional guardsman, so I had a family back home, a very young family, but also had a business. And my first deployment, I was a partner in a business. Second deployment, I actually was an independent consultant. So over there, though, I remember thinking, I'm focused on one thing. I'm working here with a team. We all know what we're doing. We're all moving in the same direction together, and we're all focused on one thing. We eat it, we breathe it, we sleep it. It's all we do.
Okay.
And in some ways, that's a luxury because you're not distracted by other stuff. But then when you come back to the world, for an active service member, it may be coming back to their family. But for guardsmen and reservists, it's coming back not only to your family, but then to your career and the broader part of the community that you've been, most of us very, very engaged in. So that can be tricky because all those things have moved on without you. So you don't come back and just pick up where you left off. Things have changed and you've changed.
Yes.
And in many ways, sometimes you don't notice or realize, but those back here in the world in your life, they see that, and oftentimes see that in ways you don't.
Do you think it takes the veterans, and did this happen with you, a little bit by surprise? Obviously, unless you've sustained a serious injury, which is obvious, but along those lines, when you come back and you're like, okay, I'm back, I remember what it was like, I'm going to get back into it, and then you realize, wait, this is harder. I'm not quite where I was when I left. Does it take them by surprise, or are veterans more, aware that, it's going to be different when I come back?
Well, I think for those who've deployed many times and have returned back, then you begin to expect the hang of it. But it's in that first time or two, at least in my own personal experience and anecdotally with others, friends of mine, and some of the veterans I see that we serve at Operation Stand Down, is that first time coming back or so does kind of catch you off guard. And all of us think, hey, I'm resilient, I'm tough, I'm strong, it won't be a problem for me. And I want others to, there's others more in need than I am. Let them get the resources, or I can't show that I'm struggling because, I'm a service member, I'm a veteran, I'm supposed to be the tough role model. And so it can catch you by surprise, and many times it can take many years before you reach out for resources that you've earned and that you deserve, and in many cases that you really need.
And the main thing you said, as we were talking before the show, is that you cannot isolate yourself. And some of them do, and so when you do, that's where then we worry about some of the issues back stateside, which could be you turn to drugs or, gosh forbid, suicide, things like that. And I can understand that. They come back, or you come back, and you're feeling like, well, I'm a macho soldier or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to seek help because that's a sign of weakness, which, in my opinion, seeking help is a sign of strength.
It's a sign of moral courage.
Yes, it is.
I think it is a sign of moral courage because it's tough to admit.
Sure.
We've got pride, we've got all those things, and it's tough to admit that, I'm like anybody else. And if I'm like anybody else, then I'm going to need help from time to time.
Right.
And that can be hard for a lot of folks to I think the thing is, and as you were talking through that, about the isolation is disconnectedness. I know that was something I really struggled with when I came back. I felt disconnected from my family. I felt disconnected from my career. I felt disconnected from friends. I felt disconnected from my church community. I just felt disconnected from everything.
What'd you do?
Well, one thing, I was still in the Guard. Okay. So I still felt connected to my military community.
Okay, at least there was something
exactly
there.
Right. So there was something there for that. And then actually part of my winding up working at Operation Stand Down Tennessee has been fantastic for me because it helps me maintain that connection, that link. But once I realized that, hey, the issue I'm dealing with here is disconnected with, then I was able to go and get some help and do the things that it has taken me to really be reconnected, that sense of purpose back, and really just fall back in love with every aspect of my life here, and the fear, all those things that I fought for and served for. But if you don't make that connection back, then that's where that isolation can kick in, and that becomes a slippery slope that just becomes a full downhill, luge, if you will, and that's where we get really concerned. And that's part of what Operation Stand Down's been doing the last half dozen years. Is we've been there to serve chronically homeless veterans, which was a tremendous need societally and still is a need in the community, and particularly for that particular individual who's homeless. But the broader need now, where we have a really opportunity, especially with the post 9/11 generation, which I'm a member of in my mid-50s, is how do we establish that connection so we can prevent the isolation? Studies have shown that at least half, if not more, of veterans who've committed suicide, that 22 a day, were not engaged at all with the VA, were not engaged with the VFW or American Legions, or even some of the newer programs like Mission Continues or Team Red, White, and Blue, but they were isolated. They didn't fit back in if they were going back to school. They didn't feel like they were connecting back at their jobs, back with their families, and so they began to pull away. And if they don't have a good support system of friends around them that are right there, then that isolation can become very, very acute.
All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, I guess I want to follow up on that point just in terms of how do you find them then, especially if they're homeless, and how you go about it if they don't have that and they're falling down into this abyss. But if you don't know about it and they're not going to seek it, and I know there's ways to do it, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll open up the phone lines too, 737-7587. I know many of you may deal with the VA, and as we know, there have been issues with the VA, but at the same time, we've seen some improvements. I want your thought on that as well. But we'll continue as we talk about not only Operation Stand Down, but of course on this day, Veterans Day, pay honor to all of those who have served in our military. We'll take a break and be back with your calls and more with our guest right after this.